Paramanande. Hari Hari Bol. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. This morning we are reading from the Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, chapter 10, text 48 through 50. So we'll be covering 3 verses. There's a lot of ground to cover. Text 48. Shaunaka uvacha yad aha no bhavan suta yad aha no bhavan suta kshata bhagavata uttama kshata bhagavata uttama chachara tirtani bhuvas chachara tirthani bhuvas tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan. Shaunaka uvacha yad aha no bhavan suta kshata bhagavata uttamaha chachara tirthani bhuvas tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan. We'll read text 49 and 50 also. Text 49. Kshatuhu kausharavestasya. So maybe if we have a phone, we can pull it up because it's not here. Kshatuhu kausharavestasya samvado dhyatma samshritaha samvado dhyatma samshritaha yadvasa bhagavamstasmai yadvasa bhagavamstasmai prishtastatvam uvachaha prishtastatvam uvachaha. Text 50. Bruhi nastadidam saumya bruhi nastadidam saumya vidhurasya vicheshtitam vidhurasya vicheshtitam bandhutyaga nimittam cha bandhutyaga nimittam cha yataiva gatavan punaha yataiva gatavan punaha. Maybe if we can have a few volunteers from the Prabhujis and Matajis. Yes, 48, 49, 50. Shaunaka uvacha yad aha no bhavan suta kshata bhagavata uttamaha chachara tirthani bhuvas tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan. Text 49. Oh, okay. Yes. Shaunaka uvacha yad aha no bhavan suta kshata bhagavata uttamaha chachara tirtani bhuvas Tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan. Matajis. Yad ahano bhavan sutta shata bhagavata uttamaha chachara tirthani bhuvas tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan. Shaunaka uvacha yad ahano bhavan sutta Kshata bhagavata uttamaha chachara tirtani bhuvas tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan. Shaunaka uvacha yad ahano bhavan sutta kshata bhagavata uttamaha chachara tirtani bhuvas tyaktva bandhun sudhustyajan. Word to word by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Shaunaka uvacha. Sri Shaunaka Muni said, Yat, as, aha, you said, naha, unto us, bhavan, your good self, sutta, O sutta, kshata, vidura, bhagavata uttamaha, one of the topmost devotees of the Lord. Chachara, practiced. Tirthani, places of pilgrimage. Bhuvaha, on the earth. Tyaktva, leaving aside. Bandhun, all relatives. Sudhustyajan, very difficult to give up. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. Shaunaka Rishi, after hearing all about the creation, inquired from Sutta Goswami about Vidhura, for Sutta Goswami had previously informed him how Vidura left home, leaving aside all his relatives, who were very difficult to leave. Purport. The rishis headed by Shaunaka were more anxious to know about Vidura, who met Maitreya Rishi while traveling to the pilgrimage sites of the world. Translation and purport for text 49 and 50. Shaunaka Rishi said, let us know, please, what topics were discussed between Vidura and Maitreya, who talked on transcendental subjects, and what was inquired by Vidura and replied by Maitreya. Also, please let us know the reason for Vidura's giving up the connection to his family, connection of his family members, and why he again came home. Please also let us know the activities of Vidura while he was in the places of pilgrimage. Purport. Sri Sutta Goswami was narrating the topics of the creation and destruction of the material world, but it appears that the rishis, headed by Shaunaka, were more inclined to hear transcendental subjects, which are on a higher level than physical. There are two classes of men, namely those too addicted to the gross body and the material world, and others on the higher level who are interested more in transcendental knowledge. Srimad Bhagavatam gives facility to everyone, both to the materialist and to the transcendentalist. By hearing Srimad Bhagavatam in the matter of Lord's glorious activities, both in the material world and in the transcendental world, men can derive equal benefit. The materialists are more interested in the physical laws and how they are acting, and they see wonders in those physical glamours. Sometimes due to these physical glamours, they forget the glories of the Lord. They should know definitely that physical activities and their wonders are all initiated by the Lord. The rose in the garden gradually takes its shape and color to become a beautiful and sweet and not by blind physical law, although it appears like that. Behind the physical law is the direction of the complete consciousness of the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, things cannot take shape so systematically. The artist draws a picture of a rose very nicely, with all attention and artistic sense, and yet it does not become as perfect as the real rose. If that is the real fact, how can we say that the real rose has taken its shape without intelligence behind the beauty? This sort of conclusion is due to poor fund of knowledge. One must know from the above description of creation and annihilation that the Supreme Consciousness, being omnipresent, can take care of everything with perfect attention. That is the fact of the omnipresence of the Supreme Lord. Persons still more foolish than the cross materialists, however claim to be the transcendentalist, and claim to have such supreme, all-pervading consciousness, but offer no proof. Such foolish person cannot know what is going on behind the next wall, yet they are falsely proud of possessing the cosmic, all-pervading consciousness of the Supreme Person. For them also, hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is great help. It will open their eyes to see that simply by claiming supreme consciousness, one does not become supremely conscious. One has to prove in the physical world that he has such supreme consciousness. The rishis of Naimisharanya, however, were above the gross materialist and the false transcendentalist, and thus they were always anxious to know the real truth in the transcendental matters as discussed by authorities. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Om Ajnanatirmirandasya Jnananjanashalakaya Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnupadaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin iti namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschate Deshatarine. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So as we see that this Srimad Bhagavatam is not different from Sri Krishna. When the Supreme Lord, Vrindavan Chandra, when he decides to appear in the society of animals, he appears as Varahadev. When that same Supreme Lord decides to appear in human-like personalities, he appears as Maryada Purushottam Sri Ramachandra. When that same Supreme Lord decides to appear in the society of mountains, he appears as Sri Giriraj Govardhan. When that same Supreme Lord decides to advent in the society of transcendental sound vibration, he appears as the holy name or Sri Harinam. And that same Supreme Lord, when he decides to appear in the society of transcendental sacred literature, he appears as Srimad Bhagavatam. So this Srimad Bhagavatam that Srila Prabhupada and the predecessor acharyas have bestowed us with is not different from Sri Krishna. Is not different from the same Vrindavan Chandra, Vrindavan Nath. And as we are building on this point as to how Srimad Bhagavatam is not different from Sri Krishna, the Shastras time and again explain to us that every canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam maps to a limb of Sri Krishna's body. The first two cantos, which are the introduction, they form the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Just like when we all join the movement as newcomers, we are always told that one should not directly see the face of the Lord, but one should progressively start from the lotus feet and up above we go and see the lotus face. Similarly, Srila Prabhupada would explain that one should not prematurely jump to the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, but rather systematically, from the lotus feet, one should start studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. So the first two cantos of the Srimad Bhagavatam are like the introduction. They are the lotus feet of the Lord. Canto 3 and Canto 4, they are the arms of the Supreme Lord. In fact, they are the thighs of the Supreme Lord. Canto 5 is the navel. Canto 6 is the chest. 7 and 8 are the arms, the bahu. 7 and 8 are the arms. Canto 9 is the neck of the Supreme Lord. So we see it's systematically going from the lotus feet is going up. So Canto 9 is the neck of the Supreme Lord. And Canto 10 is the beautiful, smiling face of Shama Sundar Shri Krishna or Vrindavan Chandra Shri Krishna. And now we are left with Canto 11 and 12, which is nothing but the forehead and the head respectively. So in this way we find every canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam maps to a particular limb of Shri Krishna's body. One time Srila Prabhupada was here in North America, and he was there in one of the temples. And Prabhupada was sitting in his quarters, and from the quarters there was a big glass window. And Prabhupada was looking out from the glass window, and he saw one of his disciples. One of his disciples was a Mataji. She was coming back to the temple. She was entering the temple. And she had a couple of books in her hand. So when Prabhupada saw that, he immediately called His Holiness Tamal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. And he asked Tamal Krishna Maharaj that, did she go for book distribution? And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, yes, Prabhupada. And Prabhupada's eyes just lit up. Earlier we were there in the Palace of Gold, and we were speaking to His Grace Bhanavata Prabhu. And he was explaining that sometimes when Prabhupada had to emphasize a point, his eyes would just lit up. In a regal Bengali fashion, he would just lit up. So Prabhupada became very happy. And he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj, is there an opportunity that I can speak to her? It's Prabhupada's own disciple, but Prabhupada is asking permission. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj said, Prabhupada, if you order, I can ask that Mataji to come here. And Srila Tamal Krishna Maharaj asked her, and she came with all the books. And Prabhupada was sitting, and he asked, so, where did you go? And that Mataji, she replied that, Srila Prabhupada, I went to the airport to distribute books. And Prabhupada became more interested. And he said, what kind of people did you meet there? And she said, Prabhupada, I met all kinds of people, because airport is a place where all kinds of people come. So she said, Prabhupada, I met the engineers, I met the doctors, I met the teachers, I met the pilots, I met everyone. And Prabhupada became more interested. He said, what did they say? What was their reaction? You see, Prabhupada would be so eager, not just to write books, but he would also be eager to know what the audience think about that book. So Prabhupada said, what was their reaction? How did they exclaim? What did they tell you? And she said, Prabhupada, all of them said the same thing. They flipped through the pages and they said, it is bold and it is uncompromising. It is very powerful, it is bold and it is uncompromising. And Prabhupada closed his eyes and said, yes, my Guru Maharaj was like this. He was bold and he was uncompromising. And I, being the disciple of Srila Saraswati Thakur, I am following the same mood, being bold and being uncompromising. And the Bhagavatam was kept in front of Prabhupada. And Prabhupada just flipped through the page, and a very beautiful verse came up that supported what Prabhupada said. Krishne swadhamo pagate dharma jnana abhidesaha kalau nashta drishamesha puranarko dhunoditaha. In the first canto, third chapter, text 43, the Srimad Bhagavatam describes Krishne swadhamo pagate, when Sri Krishna decided to go back to the spiritual world from the place where he came. Dharma jnana abhidesaha. Dharma and jnana, that is religiosity and knowledge, they also accompanied Krishna. Shyam Sundar Shri Krishna decided to go back, and knowledge and religiosity, they were also accompanying Krishna. And naturally in a society where there is no religion, no knowledge, it is dark. Not externally dark, but internally dark. And Krishna understands. And because there is internal darkness, dharma jnana abhidesaha kalau nashta drishamesha, to destroy this darkness of the age of Kali, Puran arka dhunoditaha. This Srimad Bhagavatam rose like the transcendental sun to dispel the darkness that is there outside and also the darkness that is there inside. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, this is the proof. Srimad Bhagavatam is as powerful as the sun. And if someone studies Srimad Bhagavatam every single day, systematically, it's only a matter of time. Just like the rays of the sun pierce the fog. See, outside it's completely filled with fog. But it's only a matter of time. The rays of the sun will pierce the fog and completely destroy the vision that we are not able to see. Similarly, Srimad Bhagavatam is like that sun that destroys the fog-like darkness, the andhakar that is prevalent in our heart for lifetimes together. So we are emphasizing on this point because we see text 48, 49 and 50. They all are of the same point. They all carry the same mood as to how Shaunakadi Rishi and all other sages, Shaunakadi Rishi, how they are all eager to hear transcendental subject matters. Srila Prabhupada here is clearly explaining that prior to this, Suta Goswami already explained creation. He already explained annihilation. And all the sages, headed by Shaunaka Rishi, they all heard it. But their heart was more inclined to hear about Sri Krishna. Generally, we also see, when it comes to philosophy, the eyes always doze. Siddhanta boliye chitte na kara alas, iha hoite Krishna lage sudrida manas. Kaviraj Goswami in Chaitanya Charitamrita describes, Siddhanta boliye chitte na kara alas. When Siddhanta is described, when philosophy is described, one should not be lazy. Because iha hoite Krishna lage sudrida manas. By hearing Siddhanta, our faith, our surrender to the lotus feet of Sri Krishna solidifies. Pastimes are important, but more important is the Siddhanta, the philosophy behind those pastimes. And similarly, here we find the sages, they gave a submissive oral reception. They heard about annihilation and creation, but their heart was naturally inclined to the transcendental subject matters of the Supreme Lord. Their heart was inclined to understand when Vidura went on a pilgrimage yatra. We see this is that section where Vidura is about to go for a pilgrimage yatra. So the sages are keen to know what were the topics discussed when Vidura met Maitreya Muni. What were the subject matters discussed because of which he was so inspired, he was so enthused that he left everything and went away from the family. What were the transcendental subject matters that were discussed? So we find that Srimad Bhagavatam, in all the 12 cantos, it discusses 10 subject matters. Atra sarga visargascha sthanam poshanam utaya manmantara ishanu katha nirodham muktim ashraya. The first 2 cantos, as we discussed, as this is from the 2nd canto, the first 2 cantos are the introduction, but from the 3rd canto up until the 12th canto, 10 subject matters are discussed. And this being from the 2nd canto, this is in fact the last few verses. Verse 51 ends the 2nd canto. So we are almost on the verge of completing 2nd canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And here as we see, Shaunakadi Rishi, they're exclaiming, they're asking Suta Goswami that, my dear Suta Goswami, can you please tell us what was discussed in that pilgrimage yatra that Vidura did? And now, whom are they asking this question to? They're asking this question to Suta Goswami. And as we see time and again, that we have the cloud. The cloud takes the water from the ocean. It doesn't have inherent water, but it takes water from the ocean and goes and showers it everywhere. The desert is devoid of the water, but it's the cloud that takes water from the ocean and showers it everywhere, not just on the desert, but completely everywhere around. Similarly, if we find in the morning prayers, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he says that Sri Guru is like that transcendental cloud. Samsara dhava nalalida loka tranaya karunya ghana ghanatvam praptasya kalyana gunarana vasya vande guroshri charanaravindam. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur explains that Sri Guru is also like that transcendental cloud. Why? Because he takes the mercy from Sri Krishna. As we know, Sri Krishna is Karuna Sindhu. He is an ocean of compassion. He is an ocean of mercy. But we don't have the adhikar, we don't have the capability to access that mercy. But Sri Guru is like that via medium. He is that cloud who takes the mercy from Sri Krishna and showers it on his disciples. And similarly we find Suta Goswami is also like that cloud. Why? Because he was present in the assembly when Shukadeva Goswami spoke to Parikshit Maharaj. Through his ears, he completely accepted. He drank the nectarian pastimes of Sri Krishna from the pages of Bhagavatam. And now, like the cloud, he has gone all the way to give it to the sages, headed by Shaunaka Rishi and others, Shaunaka Adi Rishi. So just like a cloud picks up water and goes and showers it everywhere, similarly Suta Goswami is the transcendental cloud, taking the mercy, taking the instructions, taking the teachings, taking the leelas, taking every single thing through his karna, through his ears. His ears were like the pot, and through the ear-like pot, he was drinking the nectar that Shukadeva Goswami was presenting. And after having accepted everything, like that cloud, he went and gave it to Shaunaka Adi Rishi. And as he started speaking, as Suta Goswami starts speaking, he explains as to how Vidura started on a pilgrimage yatra. That's the coming section. The third canto starts with a section as to how Vidura goes on a pilgrimage yatra. We see time and again we hear this, pilgrimage, Tirth Yatra, Kartik Yatras. That is something which excites devotees. The year of Kartik, where devotees from North America and around the world fly into these holy places like Vrindavan Dham, like Mayapur Dham, like Jagannath Puri. So our acharyas very beautifully describe. They give us the real definition of a tirth, the real definition of a pilgrimage. Of course, the places where Krishna performed pastimes are a pilgrimage, no doubt. But Srimad Bhagavatam, in the future cantos, it explains, Tirthi kurvanti tirthani swantastena gatabrata. The places that is filled with exalted sadhus. Those exalted sadhus who have bound Krishna in their heart. Those exalted sadhus who have done Damodar Leela in their heart, who have bound Krishna in their heart. The sadhus, when they are present in a particular place, is the presence of that sadhu that makes the place glorious. The place is anyway glorious, but by the presence of sadhus, the sadhus decorate that place more. And likewise we find when we go to these pilgrimage places, the attraction is to go to Jamuna. The attraction is to go to Ganga. Why? Because it is believed in Vedic tradition that when we take bath in these pilgrimage places, like Ganga and Jamuna, the sins that we have committed for lifetimes together gets nullified in a fraction of a second. But Srila Narottam Das Thakur describes, greater than taking bath in Ganga is the opportunity to look at exalted sadhus. Gangara parasha hoile paschate pavan darshane pavitra koro e tumar gon. Srila Narottam Das Thakur explains, Gangara parasha hoile paschate pavan. In order to take bath in Ganga, Ganga doesn't come to us. But we have to book flight tickets. We have to manage the schedule of our office. We have to manage the schedule of our kids. Make sure that there are no exams. And after all that, we go to Ganga Devi. And then we take bath multiple times. We dip in the waters of Ganga multiple times. And that's when we get purified. But Srila Narottam Das Thakur says, this is glorious, no doubt. But greater than this is Darshane pavitra koro e tumara gun. When exalted sadhus come in an assembly, when exalted sadhus come in a congregation, just by their sight, when they look at us, the sins that we have committed for lifetimes together are burned to ashes. So Narottam Das Thakur says, Ganga is glorious, but greater than Ganga are the exalted sadhus, exalted pure devotees, like Srila Prabhupada. Darshane pavitra e tumara gun. When such sadhus look at us, there is complete purification. But here in this case we find Vidura is going on a pilgrimage yatra where he is deciding to walk to different places. And we see that Shaunaka Adi Rishi, they are making this point that, my dear Suta Goswami, what were the topics discussed? We know earlier you mentioned that he's going to meet Maitreya Muni. between Maitreya Muni and Vidura, what were the topics discussed? And Sutta Goswami is such a beautiful speaker, and Bhagavatam is such a transcendental scripture, that before opening up the conversation between Maitreya Muni and Vidura, Srimad Bhagavatam takes us into another conversation. So it's a nested conversation, a conversation into a conversation into a conversation. So before Maitreya Muni and Vidura can speak, the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the first 6 chapters, start off with another conversation that is between Vidura and a personality by the name Uddhava. When Vidura is going on a pilgrimage yatra, by the Lord's supreme arrangement, he comes to the banks of Jamuna in the land of Vrindavan. And when he's there in the land of Vrindavan, trying to soak in the mood of Braj, trying to soak in the mood of Vrindavan Dham, he comes face to face, in contact with a personality called as Uddhav. Now it's of paramount importance to understand who is Uddhav. All this conversation is before Vidura meets Maitreya Muni. So when he is meeting Uddhav, Srimad Bhagavatam speaks about the glorious position of Uddhava. Because to understand the conversation between Vidura and Uddhava, we have to also understand who is Uddhav. In the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, we find the position, the exalted nature of Uddhava is described. Vrishninam pravaro mantri krishnasya daita sakha sakshad brahaspati shishyo uddhavo buddhi sattama. Canto 10, chapter 46, text 1 of the Srimad Bhagavatam describes the position of Uddhav. Who is Uddhav? Vrishninam pravara mantri. Now this is very interesting. Vrishninam pravara mantri. Who are the mantris? The mantris are those who give mantra to solve a problem. If two people are having a problem, a mantri is someone who will give mantras to solve their problem. That personality is called as a mantri. Greater than a mantri is a vara mantri. And greater than a vara mantri is pravara mantri. It's almost like in English we have positive, comparative, and superlative. Sweet, sweeter, sweetest. Similarly, mantri, vara mantri, pravara mantri. Now who's Uddhav? He's not a mantri. He's neither a vara mantri. Vrishninam pravara mantri. When the mantris would have a problem, they would go to a vara mantri. When the vara mantri would have a problem, he would go to a pravara mantri. And that pravara mantri is Uddhav. Very exalted nature. Vrishninam pravara mantri krishnasya daita sakha. And is Krishna's very dear friend. If I go on to say that, oh, the Prime Minister of India is my dear friend, there are so many people around the world who may claim that the Prime Minister of India is my dear friend. But if the Prime Minister of India comes to me and says that he is my dear friend, that's a big statement. If I say that the Prime Minister is my dear friend, well, there are so many who claim that. But if the Prime Minister himself comes and says, oh, Arjun Sakhā Dāsa is my dear friend, well, that's a big statement. Similarly, here we find Uddhav's friend is not Krishna. Krishnasya daita sakha. Krishna is saying, my dear friend is Uddhav. That's a big statement. And Sakshad Brahaspati Shishyo. He's the personal student of Brahaspati. Now we may have this question. What is so glorious about it? Well, the glorious aspect is Brahaspati never had any human disciples. Uddhav was the only human disciple of Brahaspati. In addition to that, Brahaspati would never teach someone one-on-one. He would teach one demigod, and that demigod would teach another 5, that 5 would teach another 10, and that 10 would teach another 20. But Brahaspati would teach only one. But for Uddhav, he personally sat down and taught Uddhav, even though he was a human. Sakshad Brahaspati Shishyo. And that is why Uddhavo Buddhi Sattama. Uddhava is very intelligent. So that Uddhava met Vidura on the banks of Jamuna in the land of Vrindavan. And as they started speaking, as Uddhava heard the name Krishna, as he heard the name Krishna from the lips of Vidura, because Vidura inquired that, my dear Uddhava, can you speak something about Krishna? You have been with Krishna. You know Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes. can you touch the surface? Can you explain to me something about Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes? And the moment Uddhava heard the name Krishna from the lips of Vidura on that pilgrimage yatra, the Srimad Bhagavatam describes that Uddhava remained silent for one muhurta. One muhurta is 48 minutes. For 48 minutes, Uddhava couldn't speak anything. His throat was completely choked, tears flowing from his eyes, hair standing on end. As I always say this, our hair stands on end when there's no heater in the room. That's our sad state. But the exalted devotees, their hair stands looking at Sri Krishna. And here, Uddhava is having tears just hearing the name Krishna from the lips of Vidura. As Srila Narottam Das Thakur sings in the famous bhajan that Prabhupada dearly loved. Of all the bhajans that Prabhupada sang, there was one bhajan that Prabhupada loved, and that was Gauranga Bolite Habe. As Srila Narottam Das Thakur describes, Gauranga Bolite Habe, Pulaka Sharir, Hari Hari Bolite Noyane Babe Nir. Srila Narottam Das Thakur describes, when will that day come when I will chant the name Gauranga, 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 Shri Sachinandan Gauranga Mahaprabhu ki. Narottam Das Thakur describes, when will that day come when I will chant Gauranga Mahaprabhu's name and my cheeks will be filled, they will be wet in tears, my hair standing on end. This is the same that Uddhava experienced when he heard the name Krishna. We have also been chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. We have also been chanting Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's name. But seldom do we find our hair stands on end. But here we find such exalted devotees like Uddhava and Narottam Das Thakur. By hearing the name Krishna, they are completely speechless. And then Uddhava starts speaking. He starts speaking to Vidura about Krishna's beauty. He starts off, he opens the conversation. The third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, from a few verses from now, it opens up by speaking about Krishna's Rupa Madhuri, about Krishna's beauty. As Prabhupada explains in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, one of the qualities that Krishna has in Vrindavan is Rupa Madhuri, the brilliant nature of his exquisite form in the land of Vrindavan Dham. And Uddhava explains, Param Padam Bhushana Bhushanangam. He says that generally in this world, the ornaments decorate a person. We see, generally people, whether it's a marriage or whether it's some event, they all wear ornaments. Why? Because it is believed the ornaments decorate a person. But Uddhava says, no, wait. This is how it worked in the material world, but it doesn't work this way for Krishna. Param Padam Bhushana Bhushanangam. For Krishna, the ornaments don't decorate Krishna, but Krishna decorates the ornaments. Krishna ornaments the ornament. For us, we have to wear the ornament, we have to wear the makeup, we have to wear all the cosmetics, and then maybe we look little beautiful. But for Sri Krishna, even though he's mega sham, even though he's bluish black in color, Uddhava explains, the ornaments don't decorate Krishna. Krishna ornaments the ornament. He decorates the ornament. And Uddhava goes on to explain. He says, when Krishna appeared in this world, this section is so beautiful. Before Vidura Maitreya conversation, it's this beautiful section of Vidura Uddhav Samvad. And Vidura explains that when Krishna appeared in this world, Krishna was there in the cradle. Kavi Karnapur in Anand Vrindavan Champu describes Krishna was there in the cradle. And Maya Yashoda came and she looked at Krishna. And she looked at Krishna's small, pinkish feet. And she was convinced that those pinkish lotus feet are like pink lotus flowers. Then she looked at the hands of Sri Krishna. They were again like pink lotus flowers. Then she looked at the small teeth, the milk white teeth inside Krishna. And she was convinced they are the white kunda flowers. And then she looked at the face of Krishna. And Krishna's face was like a black lotus flower. So Mother Yashoda was convinced it's not Krishna, but it's a box of different flowers. because the feet was a pink flower, the teeth were white flowers, and the face was a black lotus flower. Then she looked at the nails of Krishna, and the nails were radiating. They were effulgent. She looked at the fingernails, and they were effulgent, and she was convinced, wait a minute, this is not a box of flowers, this is a box of jewels, because they're emanating, they're radiating. And at that time, she looked at the lips of Sri Krishna. And as Satyavrata Muni in Damodar Ashtakam, he says, Idam te mukham bojam atyanta nirle britam kuntalai snigdharatyaishcha gopya muhuschumbitam bimbaraktadaram me manasya virastam alam lakshalabhe. As Satyavrata Muni describes, Krishna's lips is like a freshly cut bimba fruit. It's crimson red. And Mother Yashoda was convinced, this is not a box of flowers, this is not a box of jewels, but this is a box of fruits. And when Mother Yashoda was meditating, Krishna was thinking to himself, I came to this world to taste the Vatsalya ras of Mother Yashoda, but seems like my mother is becoming a yogi. She is meditating like a yogi. First she is looking at my feet, then she is looking at my face, she is looking at my nails. Krishna thought to himself, this is not the reason I have come to Vrindavan. There are so many yogis who are meditating on me, but I don't want my mother to become a yogi. Thinking thus, Kavi Karnapur describes Krishna yawned. Baby Krishna, for the first time, he yawned. And as Krishna yawned, Mother Yashoda looked at the yawning of Sri Krishna and she forgot everything. Kavi Karnapur in Anandavan Champu describes, when will that day be ours, when we can see that beautiful yawning face of Sri Krishna. So as Uddhava was describing this Rupa Madhuri, Vidura was having tears in his eyes. And as Shaunaka the Rishi were hearing the same thing from Suta Goswami, they were also surcharged in devotional ecstasy. Devotional life is very contagious. We see in this world also, if we hang around with drug addicts, it's only a matter of time. We will also be like them. And similarly, when we hang around with devotees who are experiencing the sweetness of Krishna Bhakti, it's only a matter of time. It's a wireless Bluetooth transfer. It's only a matter of time it's going to come to us. And as Uddhava was explaining all this, the Rupa Madhuri, to Vidura, Vidura was having tears and hearing the same thing from Suta Goswami, Shaunaka the Rishi. They were also having ecstasy. They were also having tears. And they were saying, Aniyor, 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 please continue, please don't stop. These verses of Srimad Bhagavatam give so much happiness to the heart. Srila Raghunath Goswami, one of our 6 Goswamis, he would chant every verse of the Srimad Bhagavatam in about 6 melodies. 6 melodies. How many melodies can we chant? Maybe 1, maybe 2. But our 6 Goswamis, like earlier today after the Mangalarti, His Grace Jai Krishna Prabhu was reading from the Namamrit. And there Prabhupada explains, we are the followers of the 6 Goswamis. And here is one of the 6 Goswamis, that is Raghunath Goswami, who would chant these verses in about 6 melodies and cry, studying the Srimad Bhagavatam. And whom are they following? They are following Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was no less. Shunite Prabhu apara santosh, bala Prabhu, bala bara. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu would hear these verses of Srimad Bhagavatam, Shunite Prabhu apara santosh, he would be so happy just to hear the verses of Bhagavatam. Bala Prabhu, bala bar. He would tell Swarup Damodar Goswami, don't stop, continue, please continue, please don't stop. So this Srimad Bhagavatam has so much power that it can grant the same position that was granted to Uddhava, the same position that was granted to Vidura, the same position that was granted to Suta Goswami and Shaunaka the Rishi. And what was that position? To cry for Krishna. Srila Gaur Govinda Maharaj would make a very strong point. He would say, the culmination of our Krishna Bhakti is when we cry for Krishna. Without tears, Krishna sees everything, but Krishna doesn't get bound in the heart. Dhruva Maharaj cried, he got Krishna. Prahlad cried, he got Krishna. Bilva Mangala Thakur cried, he got Krishna. Rukmini cried, she got Krishna. The Braja Gopis cried, they got Krishna. From the first page of the first canto to the last page of the last canto, there is one point, there is one commonality. Those who have cried for Krishna have got Krishna. And this Srimad Bhagavatam, regular hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam, cultivates this mood of developing tears for Shri Krishna. Just like we find in this world also. A mother may be there in the kitchen and she's making some rotis. And the child is there in some other room and he's crying. And when the child is crying, the mother goes and gives some chocolate. The child has that chocolate, but after 5 minutes, again starts crying. So then she goes and gives some toy. The child plays with that toy for 5 minutes and again stops playing, and then he again starts crying. Finally, after one point, the mother realizes, it's not the chocolate that's going to please my child. It's not the toy that's going to please my child. It's nothing except me that's going to please my child. That's when she decides to leave her kitchen. She decides to leave everything and she runs towards her child. And when she runs, the child is happy. Similarly, in this world, Krishna is like the mother and we are like those children. When we cry little in bhakti, Krishna will give dhanam, like the chocolate. And we have little dhanam and we forget Krishna. Then we again start crying, Krishna will give manam, he will give prestige in the society. Then we again forget, and then we are again crying, and then Krishna gives something. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu teaches us, na dhanam, na janam, na sundarim, kavitam va jagadisha kamaye, mama janmani janma ishware bhavatad bhakti ahaituki. Bhakti means tears. Begging and beseeching the Lord, just like a small child cries and beseeches his mother. So this Srimad Bhagavatam is so beautiful, especially here in this section we find when Vidura is going for the pilgrimage yatra. He is meeting different personalities, but the third canto opens up by the beautiful discussion between Vidura and Uddhava. And after he meets Uddhava, after he understands about Krishna's Vrindavan pastimes, about Krishna's Rupa Madhuri, now he goes to Maitreya Muni with some frame of reference. He knows who Krishna is in Vrindavan. He knows what were the pastimes performed. And then the discussion that takes place between Maitreya Muni and Vidura is the famous Vidura Maitreya Samvad, which spans the third canto and even the fourth canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Having said this, I very humbly stop here. If there were any mistakes in the presentations, I beg devotees to kindly forgive me. I am still young, I am still learning, and it is definite that I would have made mistakes in Siddhanta and my presentation. But all the exalted devotees here, His Grace Jai Krishna Prabhu and all the exalted sadhus, if I made any mistakes, I beg devotees to kindly forgive. ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, शीला प्रभुपाद की जय, समस्त गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. This question was asked to Srila Guru Govinda Maharaj, Prabhupada's dear disciple, that what does it mean to cry for Krishna? Do we have to shed external tears? Would you want to repeat the question? So the question asked was, we say that we have to cry for Krishna in bhakti. This is the path where we cry and we get Krishna. So is crying for Krishna and crying for devotees, crying for pure Vaishnavas, pure devotees, can we equate that on the same level? Yes. So Srila Guru Govinda Maharaj, when this question was asked to him, he said that crying is of two types. First is the external tears. But he would say that external tears can sometimes be deceptive. External tears may not necessarily be because of viraha, because of separation from Sri Krishna. But when the acharyas say crying for Krishna, it means tears from the heart. Genuinely begging the Supreme Lord that, my dear Lord, I have been away from you for lifetimes together. Till when will I keep saying, I am not this body, I am the spirit soul? Like Sripad Ayendra Prabhu from Vrindavan, he would always say that when we join the movement, we are told we are not this body, we are the spirit soul. But he was so eager, he would say, till when will I just keep saying I'm not this body? If I'm not this body, who am I in connection with Krishna? When will that day come on the calendar? Today is April 22nd. Whether it's April 23rd, whether it's April 25th, when will I know in the calendar what my sambandha is with Sri Krishna? What is my sambandha tattva with Sri Krishna? So, Srila Rupa Goswami time and again mentions, and in Kaviraj Goswami, he mentions, Tatra Laulyam, the only price to get Krishna is greed, nothing else. Krishna is looking for that greed in the heart. We may or may not be perfect, but Krishna is not looking for that, because